Good morning, everybody. This is Bernardo Cortese from Cleveland, US, and for Fondazione Ricerca e Innovazione Cardiovascolare. I'm very happy today to present you one of the presentations that we had at CRT 2026 in Washington a couple of weeks ago. And this is one of the hottest topics in interventional cardiology today, which is an overview on the differences between sirolimus and paclitaxel-coated balloons for the management of coronary artery disease. I would like to start with some animal data because some animal studies are often underrepresented in our presentation, and I think that having this information as a scientific background for any device that we are evaluating is very important. And this is something that also the FDA is requiring correctly for many devices. In this study that was performed by the group of Aloki Finn and Rino Virmani, there were some concern related to paclitaxel-coated balloons, which were showing an increase in myocyte necrosis and scarring for a local application of paclitaxel, which was not present with two other types of sirolimus-coated balloons. And the other thing that came out from this study was related to the distal embolization. So in this study, the paclitaxel-coated balloon that was assessed was associated with an increase in downstream emboli, which were there also after POBA at a lesser degree, and also after sirolimus-coated balloons, but not as high as in the paclitaxel-coated balloon arm. But let's come to human data, which are quite rich. There are several studies that have compared the angiographic performance of sirolimus and paclitaxel-coated balloons. And have to be honest, it's quite clear how there is an advantage for paclitaxel in terms of late lumen loss and lumen enlargement. This is something that is not new and is quite well known in the segment. The majority of the studies have clearly shown, especially in de novo, at a lesser degree in the ISR setting, that paclitaxel-coated balloon is associated with improved late lumen loss as compared to Limus. And one of these studies was very interesting, is a Transform 1, was comparing one sirolimus with one paclitaxel-coated balloon. And it clearly showed that in the all-comer population, paclitaxel was better. But if the lesion was prepared correctly, especially in the complex lesion setting, sirolimus-coated balloon did a good job. So this is just a sub-analysis of a Transform 1 study, which let us understand how important it is to correctly prepare the lesion, especially with sirolimus-coated balloons, which probably is less forgiving if we are not preparing the vessel in a proper manner. We wanted to understand better the performance, not only from the angiographic standpoint, but mostly from the physiological standpoint from paclitaxel and sirolimus-coated balloon. And this is what we were able to do from this multi-center experience in the study called Piccoletto 6. So we collected information from several centers, experts in drug-coated balloon angioplasty. This is an independent study sponsored by Fondazione RIC, with an independent core lab in Ferrara. And we assessed native vessel disease, almost 300 patients with the basal data after DCB, final data, and angiographic follow-up. Interesting, but not surprising, here we clearly show an advantage in terms of angiographic performance with paclitaxel, with an increase in lumen enlargement, 58% overall, with an increase in the lumen also in the sirolimus-coated balloon, 40%, but not at the same degree of paclitaxel. Okay, and also late lumen loss was favoring clearly the paclitaxel-coated balloon. On the other hand, we wanted to see how was the physiological performance, and what we saw was that there was no significant difference in terms of loss of physiological performance between the end of the angioplasty and the angiographic follow-up between sirolimus and paclitaxel. So again, there is a clear advantage in terms of angiographic performance, but no difference in terms of physiological performance. Okay, now let's see how is the clinical performance and comparison between sirolimus and paclitaxel coated balloon. Unfortunately, we don't have randomized clinical trial so far with the clinical endpoints, but we have some interesting experiences. For example, we have this study from the group of Colombo, which is comparing several types of paclitaxel and sirolimus coated balloons for a total of 1,300 patients, showing at 1 year follow-up that there was no difference in terms of target lesion failure, and also for the other clinical elements that were assessed. And then we did our study by comparing two prospective registries, Eastbourne and Peer, Eastbourne with sirolimus coated balloon and Peer with paclitaxel coated balloon. And we did and already published a 1 year outcome of comparison between these two prospective registries for a total of 2,600 patients, showing no differences in terms of MACE, TLR, and MI at 1 year, either in the de novo and in the ISR setting. And interesting, we also presented and we are publishing the 2 year outcome of comparison between these two registries, analyzing the outcome with a Cox regression analysis. And what we saw, again, also at 2 years, there was no difference in terms of MACE, mortality, fatal MI, target lesion, and target vessel revascularization between sirolimus and paclitaxel coated balloon. And this forest plot is also showing that the single elements of diabetes, female sex, clinical presentation, ISR, are not changing the clinical scenario. So again, at 2 years, there is no difference between this paclitaxel and sirolimus coated balloon. But now let's try to step back and see which is the general perception now with paclitaxel and sirolimus. So we have two big trials and one ongoing. The first big trial is RECAGE-3-1, which was published a few months ago in the Lancet. We have also the 3 year follow-up published in JACC very recently. This study, patients with a simple native vessel disease were randomized after successful lesion preparation to a drug-eluting stent and a paclitaxel coated balloon, which is not available in Europe and in the US. And interesting, at 2 years, but also at 3 years, there was an advantage for the drug-eluting stent, which is still standard of care for native vessel disease as compared to this paclitaxel coated balloon. So no advantages also between 2 and 3 years. The only non-inferiority was obtained in the small vessel disease group, which is not a surprise. And then we have the other big study, which was presented recently at TCT last year, but not yet published, which is the solution study, where the target vessel failure was assessed at 1 year between a sirolimus coated balloon and a drug-eluting stent in a little bit more complex lesion population with de novo lesions. And what you can see here is clearly that the non-inferiority, which was expected, was also met at 1 year follow-up in terms of target vessel failure. So this is a big achievement for sirolimus coated balloons. And then we have the other large study whose enrollment is finished but has not been presented yet. This is a Transform 2 from our foundation, Fondazione RIC. This study aims to compare a sirolimus coated balloon to a drug-eluting stent in de novo lesions. But the difference here is that we randomize patients only after lesion preparation. For the solution study, patients were randomized upfront, and this led to an increase in the usage of drug-eluting stent as a bailout strategy in the drug-coated balloon, or as part of the strategy in the drug-coated balloon arm, 20%. In a Transform 2, randomization is done after lesion preparation, and randomization is done between a everolimus eluting stent and this sirolimus coated balloon. The enrollment of the study is finished, and the bailout stenting, I can anticipate, has been pretty low to 7%. This is the study leadership. Differently from the other studies, this is a completely independent study from this foundation. This is the steering committee of expert physicians. We have a quite strong clinical event committee coordinated by Dr. Brugaletta and a quite strong data safety monitor board coordinated by Professor Capodan. So, in conclusion, paclitaxel coated balloon is there since the very beginning of this technology, since 2007, when the first DCB has been approved in Europe. We have a very large experience. It is an extremely safe device, not associated with thrombosis, and it has clear superior angiographic data. Unfortunately, the perception of paclitaxel coated balloon is perceived worse due to the paclitaxel eluting stent saga and due to the fact that all drug-eluting stents are eluting sirolimus so far, and also because at least a 3-year follow-up or AKHV1 is not as good as expected. On the other hand, sirolimus coated balloon came just lately in 2016 and 17 and later, with 3 devices currently approved in Europe and no one approved in the US. It has for sure a wider therapeutic window as compared to paclitaxel and a good safety, with one study which showed at 1 year the non-inferiority to a drug-eluting stent. Thank you for your attention.